Good evening. Welcome. I'm glad you're all here. I'm Janet Gollery McKithen. I'm a member of the steering committee, co-founder of the Committee for Social Justice, and I welcome you here tonight. I'm very excited that you're here. You could have been anywhere tonight, but you chose to be with us working against racism. We're honored and blessed that you did. This is our 11th year. As you come on, if you could mute yourself, that would help out a lot. So and the co-host will mute you, and it's not because we don't want to hear your voice, but we're just going to mute you when you come on. All right.
Oh dear.
Okay, let's mute. We especially welcome those who are joining us for the first time. We want to let you know and remind others that we didn't begin with some committee sitting down and planning a committee for racial justice. We began with an incident on May 4th, 2011, where an African-American member of the Santa Monica High School wrestling team was held against his will by two Caucasian teammates while they were chants of "slave for sale," and a noose was hung nearby with a brown dummy in it. The racially charged incident and the district's slow response were the catalyst for the formation of the Committee for Racial Justice. We immediately gathered the community together and had our first workshop within 2 weeks. The committee consists of parents of students of Santa Monica High School, students, community members, and religious leaders. Pre and post-COVID, we've held monthly workshops for the community every month. We've been doing that for 11 years. The Committee for Racial Justice has continued to focus on education and the school system, but we are actively involved in many other areas as well. We are involved with the courts, with mass incarceration, with the police, with the city, with faith communities, with food, with housing, all undergirded, of course, by white privilege. We've been holding community meetings and workshops for the past 11 years. Our mission statement reads as follows: with the conviction that all human beings deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, we are committed to combating all forms of racial injustice, whether overt or covert, whether individualized or systemic, that still take place in our community. While racism affects many cultural groups, we are especially drawn to focus on the severe impact it has on the African American community. The theme of our workshop tonight is Supercharging Our Resilience. In these challenging times of gun violence, Supreme Court rulings, and continuing COVID cases, and the ongoing racism that is becoming more and more and more blatant, we've asked some experts to come talk with us about strategies and tools to help foster and strengthen resilience in ourselves and in our communities as we do this anti-racist work. Our presenters include Dr. Karen Gunn and Rana Kirkland. One of our presenters, TJ Robinson, is not able to be here. And Robbie Jones is also not with us this evening. First, we have two important updates and ways you can take action from Patricia Hoffman and then Joanne Berlin. Patricia Hoffman is a member of the Committee for Racial Justice Housing Committee. Welcome, Patricia.
I am going to talk primarily about on Tuesday night's council meeting, but I'll start by mentioning two other items that are on the council meeting. One, Services Commission, a new commission is going to be appointed. There are only 8 applicants for the 9 spots. It would be really important for people who have a primary focus on diversity, inclusion, and equity to be on the Human Services Commission, and I encourage anybody to apply. The second thing, what I'm about to say about 11B is that 11B is something that's very important to the renters in Santa Monica, particularly the renters in rent-controlled units. We will be asking that a 3% cap be placed on the ballot to make sure that we don't have a 6% increase in controlled rents in the future. We want to reject, we want to put an immediate cap of 3% on this year. We're going to ask the council to do that. I'm glad that the mayor of Santa Monica, Sue Himmelrich, is here, and Sue is an author of the third, of what I'm mostly going to be talking about tonight. And the third thing that that we've been asking people to do is reject 11A, because there's no money in it for emergency or ongoing rent relief, and would undercut initiative that is the people's initiative, which is 11D on the agenda. So mostly what I want to talk about, so those are the quick items. Mostly what I want to talk about is 11D, which is the people's initiative that received more than 10,000 valid signatures in Santa Monica. And the purpose of 11D, which I wish were coming up before 11A on the agenda, but the purpose of 11D is the authors and the people who support them's desire to keep our rent burdened, low income Santa Monica neighbors in their homes with dignity, and to create new deed restricted affordable housing, to keep Santa Monica schools among the finest in the state. The revenues generated are specified in the initiative, and they would expand emergency rental assistance programs, such as the Preserve Our Diversity program, which is an ongoing subsidy every month to keep people in their homes. And right now it's limited, and the funds further limited. This initiative would open it to more families with children, seniors, and the disabled. And this would really help out low and very low income people who are paying more than 50% of their income in rent. Then it will also keep low income people in their homes, and rather than putting them at further risk of becoming homeless as they are now, with most of the low income population paying greater than 30%, and a significant portion of low income people in Santa Monica paying greater than 50% of their income in rent. So there are quite a number of benefits. There's money, the first 10 million goes to the schools. And after that, the money goes into the Housing Trust Fund to be distributed for the use of creating low-income housing, creating and as I said, doing the rent subsidies. The item 3A was put on the council agenda, and sort of what I think of as a cynical attempt to undermine the people's initiative. The fact that they decided on a transfer tax with the same $8 million starting point is just, I don't know how else to say it, but cynical. There are other ways of raising money, but they decided to do it this way. And if their item prevails, if both items get a majority of voters, if the item A prevails, it will, if it has one more vote than item D, it will kill item D. It will kill the work of the 10,000 people who signed the initiative, and the work of Michael Soloff, Sue Himmelrich, and John Katz, who who did all of the preparation work and created this initiative and put it forward. At $8 million, if you sell a property, now last year there were only 45 or so properties that sold for over $8 million, both residential and commercial. At $8 million, item A would cost, the amount returned to through a transfer tax to the people would be $48,000, leaving the remainder of $7,952,000 left, and it would raise $6 to $15 million a year that would go into the general fund to be spent any way they want, even though the ballot specifies in an accompanying I'm forgetting the word for it, but an advisory vote on how to spend it. And they do say for the schools, although they don't describe, they say for school programs, but they don't give any of the money directly to the schools in it. And they exempt developers from having to pay it by saying that the first sale is exempt. So even that $48,000 is real hit or miss. In the People's Initiative, it would raise $448,000 on a sale over $8 million, which leaves a balance of 7,500,000 and something, and I don't have it written down, and I can't think on my feet fast enough to figure it out. So so even giving $450 million or $448 million on an $8 million sale still leaves the seller walking away with a nice handful of money. And in fact, they would probably pay more than that to their broker's fees than what they give back to the city. And the city is what has helped add value to the property to begin with. The people who would be most hurt if 11D doesn't pass are the people who are the lowest income people in our city, who are the people who are the most rent burdened people in our city. And as this committee is well aware, that means primarily, or at least largely, people of color and seniors and disabled people. And so it's a really important measure. And even the other measure with its advisory, we know that the city chose to ignore the advisory of GS and GSH during the pandemic for good reason. The money wasn't coming in, but with a lot of work, especially by Michael Soloff, the city has agreed that it will replace those funds for housing that were taken away. So I'm afraid that that's the best I can do in a short time. And I'd like to ask Sue if there was anything that I left out or stated so inelegantly that she needs to clarify it.
Patricia, thank you. And thank you for your support of us, which has been, really steadfast through all of this. This is in essence a wealth tax. If you have a property that's you sell for $8 million or more, we're asking you to give $400,000 back to the city that allowed that property to become worth $8 million. The other measure really is a developer's measure. So they exempt the first sale of a property. So Village Trailer Park, the sale for $70 million would have been exempt. And then there was a next sale, if you want to go, but that means that the condos on the Miramar, the first sale will be exempt from this tax under the alternative measure, under the developer's measure, not under the citizens measure that we have sponsored. So you exempt the first sale of a property, including all of these very expensive properties that are being developed around here, including things like, and if you aren't aware, these apartment buildings on Lincoln, for instance, are being built and then immediately sold to somebody else. They would be exempt. This is not what we want. We are trying to tax basically luxury housing to help people stay in their homes, seniors, families, and you and all the people you know who are having trouble making the rent every month. And this, by the way, extends at this point to Section 8 tenants, who even the portion they have to pay becomes a struggle. And this is what we're trying to do. We want to keep people who live in Santa Monica in Santa Monica. We want people who work in Santa Monica to live in Santa Monica. I mean, we are trying to create a community here. The other measure has zero money for housing. Housing is not important to the developers. They're happy to create these units that are vacated every 1 to 3 years, and it's not what we want. So yes, we are going to be dealing with this on Tuesday at our meeting. I'd love you to come speak on it. At 7 p.m. is public comment.
And
I
I
saw
would also, just 2 more sentences, Joanne. One
Just
is,
2, Pat, we're running much over time.
just 2, that the cynical measure 11A has zero money in it for housing, for affordable housing and to relieve rent burdened people. That's sentence 1. And the other is letters and cards are welcome. There have been over 400 letters in favor of item 11B and 11D. More would be great. There have been so far no letters in support of item A, which is the one we oppose. So it's not garnering support elsewhere. And I'll hard stop right now and give it back to you, Joanne. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate all those details. The real takeaway is, if people could follow it, that we need you to, weigh in on this. And it is a cynical thing that they're going to deal with the developers.
And the housing committee supports what I've said.
Yes, CRJ Housing Committee supports 11B and 11D. Normally, when we start with updates, they're more brief in terms of trying to make people aware of some of the other work that we're doing during the month. So I'm going to try to very quickly just say another concern of ours, that this week we want you to be talking with the city council members and writing to them about the housing issues, but also about Thursday's meeting of the city council on the 14th of July. One of the first things up on the docket that night at 6 p.m. is going to be starting the process, and they have the public comment first, I believe, before they start the process of appointing 3 people. Well, they're appointing people to all the commissions and things in the city. But the one we're going to raise up here for a few minutes here is the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission, because this is the Police Oversight Commission that was formed in the wake of the George Floyd's murder and what happened in Santa Monica on May 31st in 2020 with the things that went wrong around the demonstrations and the looting of the downtown. So at any rate, I just want to say as fast as I can that what this commission has been put together as oversight for police, and yet it has on it, actually as the vice chair now, a retired police officer, career police person. It has 2 other people who have been spending 20 to 30 years working with PAL, Police Activities League, which is, a good thing to work with young people. But again, to say these people are pro-police is to say that, strictly speaking, they're not your run-of-the-mill civilians. Police call anyone who's not police civilian. So this is supposed to be a civilian oversight commission. And the concern we have at the moment is that there is the police union bargained that they would be able to nominate someone to sit on this commission, not vote, but sit and have a voice. So they got that slow. So there's 4 pro-police people at the moment. that man has decided that he wants to in fact run now for a voting slot. So if he were to be appointed, that would be 5 people and make it even harder to kind of push this boulder up the hill, as we heard earlier. It is, we've been trying to push the city council to put more people of color on. There, we did get a Black man on last time, but there are 2 other Black men who have applied. Xavier Bannister and Craig Ali is one of our own here. And what we want is pro-reform people. Michelle Wittick has also applied. She has been the convener of the Coalition for Police Reform, knows more, is a better researcher than anybody they could possibly have on it. Anyway, we are just pushing to ask you to get the city council members to think reform when they're thinking of who to appoint to this. Because it's, it's a kind of an uphill struggle as it is at the moment to get this commission to be doing effective work. Okay, sorry for all the time we took.
All right, thank you, Joanne. Some of the folks on this commission don't believe the police need to be reformed. They haven't seen, without any evidence, without seeing anything, without hearing anything, they just have already stated that. So those are odd people to have on a commission like that. Okay, so onward. This evening, we're honored to welcome Dr. Karen Gunn. Dr. Gunn is an incredible, courageous, thoughtful, intelligent activist, an entrepreneur, a community leader, and an educator. She has spent at least 25 years as a professor of psychology at Santa Monica College, part of that time as the dean. She's also a principal of Gunn Consulting Group, DEI, which focuses on building effective teams and creating more diversity and equity in the workplace. Activism and education have been twin pillars in Karen's life, Dr. Gunn's life. She earned a BA in psychology from Oakland University and a PhD in community psychology from the University of Michigan. Dr. Karen Gunn is the former chair of the Santa Monica Bay Area Human Relations Council. She's a health and mental health consultant and a social justice advocate. By sharing her expertise, she's able to facilitate dialogue, address white supremacy and racism, nurture institutional change, and support community growth and resilience. She participates in many local organizations and task forces. Where there's good change happening, Dr. Gunn is probably in the mix someplace. I serve on the Human Relations Council with her, and since she has been on that council, she has helped to expand our equity lens and focus. And she has been a big part of the Committee for Racial Justice throughout these years. And she's a part of the League of Women Voters and many more groups involved with making a positive difference in the community. There's much more to say, but we want to hear from her. So I'll let her speak now. Please welcome Dr. Karen Gunn.
Excuse me, I just want to remind people, especially if you're new, that the way we deal with Q&A after the speaker is we want you during the, as the speaker's speaking, if questions come into your mind, we want you to put them in the chat, but you have to direct the chat tonight instead of to Robbie and Angela. Angela's with us, but she's not feeling well and she can't talk without coughing. So direct your chat questions to either myself, Joanne Berlin, or Janet. Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Karen Gunn.
Thank you so much. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to see so many of you on the screen, particularly on a beautiful Santa Monica summer evening. I hope that I can make this presentation something that will be helpful for you. And after the presentation and the meeting this evening, Reverend Janet will send the PowerPoint out to you so that you can have it in your files if you decide you want to take a look at it. So I'm happy to share the stage with Rana Kirkland, and in a way, some of the points that I will make here I think she's going to be able to expand on considerably, given what her focus is. So Raina, it's nice to be here with you. Let me move this along.
Likewise.
And I recognize music is one of the ways that helps me to maintain my resilience. People who know me and have ridden with me, or I have rolled past them in my car, have probably heard me, as we say, bumping my music. So music keeps me sane. And I may reference a couple, 2, 3 musicians that maybe some of you are unfamiliar with. So this might add to your repertoire of understanding about folks that are out there singing and making music. So I want to talk about what resilience is, based, on my research and my work and my involvement with advocacy groups in mental health and health services. And I lead off, as I look at this, we look at this first slide, with the phrase, you have to check yourself before you wreck yourself, by a wonderful musician named Ice Cube. And the point of his lyrics are, and the relevance for tonight's presentation, is that resilience really starts with your deciding to increase your own self-awareness in many different ways, to be aware and accept and change, if you need to, how you roll when you get up in the morning and go out about your business and your work, your community involvement. This applies across the board. I am happy to be able to be a coach for executives, to coach people on life-work balance. Resilience is a big topic. In many workplaces, there's a growing effort to build resilience on the part of employees, to encourage self-care. And resilience and self-care are connected. So what I hope I can do over the course of my discussion is explain a bit about what it is, talk about why it's important, what are some of the pieces, and even offer you some tips and tools with the short time that I have. So let's start with, what the heck does it mean? So a few sound effects just to kind of make sure you're awake and staying with the program. So essentially, resilience is really about your coping skills, and parenthetically, coping skills that hopefully are effective rather than ineffective, that work for you, work in terms of your relationships, how you go about taking care of your life, living your life, interacting with other people. That includes also the thought about positive mindset. And I believe Ms. Kirkland is going to talk about mindfulness in even greater detail, which is really cool that we're kind of in sync. It's about growing yourself and understanding that as we go through our life, if we're putting one step out of the bed and we're up above ground, over time, we change, and hopefully we change for the better. So as an individual, we're dynamic. We operate in a dynamic scenario. It's safe to say that, and particularly thinking about the Committee for Racial Justice, that the dynamic environment in which individual resilience is important is fraught with political change, with decisions by Supreme Court justices, with issues related to police and community relations, with housing and fairness. And all of those things make it even more important for each of us at a personal level to be ready to rock and roll through the challenges and the stresses that come with that dynamic that is part of our community of Santa Monica, of California, and nationally. So resilience is based on a very important foundation. If we were in the Midwest, I could talk about it in terms of the basement. It's the bottom on which your house is built. And grace and gratitude is essential. Being resolute about moving forward and trying to build this skill. We're not born with resilience, but we're born with the capacity to build it. We're born with the opportunity and the option and the potential to learn. It's about intentional efforts. Resilience doesn't happen in a haphazard way. It requires some thought and some motivation. And it also requires some stick-to-itiveness, which the fancy word is tenacity. You got to be willing to stick with it, stay with it, grow with it, build on it. And why is it important? Because if you have it and you can rock and roll with it, then you're building a sense and an ability of empowerment. And people at an individual level who feel empowered help communities to become empowered. The folks that are involved with the Committee for Racial Justice, for the Human Relations Council, for the League of Women Voters, for other organizations that are based here in Santa Monica, help those organizations better if individuals bring an empowered self to their involvement. If you've got resilience and you're rolling it out in a good way, then actually you feel pretty good inside. You feel good. So you get that inner harmony that helps us also put one foot in front of the other, even when it looks like the rest of society is going to heck in a handbasket. It keeps you involved in spite of things. It allows you to embrace optimism more than pessimism because you have some hope. And it builds a platform for healthy connectivity. In other words, being able to relate to other people. And one of the bottom lines here, creativity, when we've got resilience and it's working well and we're paying attention to it, it serves our creativity. We get better. We come up with novel ideas. We can embrace innovation. We can look at new ways of dealing with old issues like systemic racism and sexism and homophobia and ableism, and we can go on and on. So what does it look like? People, you use these words and sometimes they can come across as feeling academic-y. And remember, I'm an educator from Santa Monica College, and I also appreciate that sometimes academic folks can talk at a level that isn't easily understood because we've got the 50-cent words and we don't drill down to what it really is and how it makes the best sense. So now this is one of those academic-y slides, and I'm gonna shut up for a moment and hopefully you can see the screen. I want to let you look at it without being distracted by my voice and having to think and also having to read, and then I'll add some stuff. There are 5 components here of resilience. Take a minute and take them in. So again, you're going to get a copy of this later, and this might be something that you can just look at periodically, remind yourself of it. If you feel committed to building your own resilience, if you want to talk to someone else about theirs, because sometimes we get good at it, and if we get good at it, we can sometimes recognize when other folks are doing a poor job of it. But it does include a sense of relatedness. And you got to find your peeps, which is urban lingo for your posse, which is urban lingo for your friends, your social network. And you have to figure out how to nurture those relationships. And the other side of the coin is also understand what you need to have your sense of relating to someone nurtured as well. And it's about wellness and well-being. Here in the city of Santa Monica, we have had at one time sponsored by the city, and now sort of work that stands on its own. In fact, the Human Relations Council is supporting well-being projects, supporting individuals who have made major contributions through grants that have come through it. And it is about discovering who you are and being you. There needs to be some purpose for resilience to also move forward. That purpose-driven life, which many people have written about, and I hope that I'm going to get to be one of them, is about those motivations and the dreams that you have. And we all know about that. You have those dreams. What floats that boat that's yours? What are your interests? And they may change over time. When I was going to college, my interest was every party that I could get to that looked like I was going to have a good time. So that's kind of changed over time. But you need to know where you are, which is why being resilient means that you periodically check yourself to see what you need now in your life. What does keep you afloat? What brings you joy? What gives you a sense of fulfillment? And also asking the question, what can I do? It's about effective coping skills. What you do. How do you manage the challenges that get presented to you? And how do you do that, air quotes, in a smart way? What's the approach that you have to your own emotions? Which ones do you indulge? Which ones do you overindulge? Which ones do you ignore? And it's really important to think about this because human nature, oftentimes when we are dealing with stressors, when we are dealing with things that are unpleasant, that we don't like, we get into fight or flight mode. And in both cases, it increases your stress, your cortisol levels go up. You might get the heebie-jeebies. You get fractured and frayed. Things kind of can go just all over the place. And lastly, it's important in terms of resilience to know where your resources are, to know what you can do if you need to get some support, some help, to have a playbook, at least in your mind, of what you can do to handle what's presented to you in life. And so right now, what I want to do is share a story that might kind of highlight some of these items in different ways. The personal narrative can work. So here's my quick story. I just returned from a trip to Spain. I went with people who I've traveled with before. And all of us know that it takes resilience sometimes when you travel with other people to cope with the situation. And they can be your family members. I've been camping with people where I wanted to slip away in the middle of the night or have them leave early in the morning, and they were my relatives. So we know how this can work. So the first week of my trip, I spent with just one of my travel buddies. And it kind of it took a terrible turn. And what I learned and experienced was how this individual coped with stress that always occurs when you travel. We always need to be prepared for the fact that whatever you plan, there may be some kind of something that'll get thrown into the mix that changes your schedule, that does other kinds of things. So this individual became very frustrated. And as she became frustrated, she took that frustration out on me. And we had a couple of moments where she raised her voice. I felt disrespected. It was hurtful. And I was utterly surprised because this was a wrinkle that I had never seen. So I have to tell you, when this happened this one time, I was, as there's a person on the screen, I think named Erica Leslie, who uses the word hot. I was hot. And so I had to figure out how to cope with this. And it took me a day to let the fire in my pit simmer and to stop the steam that was coming out of my ears so that I could have what we might call, Reverend J. Mack, the come to Jesus meeting. So after about a day and I could let things simmer and I'm thinking about how do I manage these emotions? How do I take care of myself? How do I acknowledge the line in the sand that she crossed? And how do I give her some feedback so that we can repair and keep this relationship hopefully on a positive place? So after about 36 hours, I said, we need to have a cup of coffee. We sat down for this cup of coffee and I described the behaviors, which is a tool that we should use. I explained the impact for me, which is a tool that we should use. I asserted my concerns. I wasn't aggressive. Those are tools that one should use, and let her know. And what I got back was denial, dismissing, and defensiveness. So I kind of took that in because that told me something about my friend that I didn't know. And I had said to myself, if this happens again, we're going to have a problem. And she gave me a bit of a feeble apology. And about 36 hours later, she did exactly the same thing again. So trust me, folks, there will not be a third time. And I learned too that sometimes, and this is important for resilience, you got to figure out how to give feedback, and you have to accept sometimes that people will not receive it well. And then you got a decision to make. And that's a healthy thing as well. We do need to know what our limits are. We need to know what our last nerve is. We need to know where the red line is in the sand, that if someone crosses it, there's a charm there. And know what to do at that point. So how this dovetails in some ways, if you haven't kind of seen it, is that you need to have the ability to show empathy. And if you don't, it can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. You need to be able to figure out what your emotions are and the best way to handle them and to express them. You need to know what your interests are. And it is okay, it is not selfish to take care of yourself. Self-care is a healthy approach. So I hope my story kind of illustrates that. And maybe the next time you see me, you can ask me whether or not I'm still friends with this person, because right now I'm not too sure. So what are the tips and tools? It's about building your awareness, and it's about practice, practice, practice. This isn't an empty effort if you want it to be successful. This isn't something that you say one day you're going to do and then the next day you stop. In many cases, most folks will say, social scientists, it's a journey. And you begin it and you stay with it because you want to stay ready so you don't have to get ready, as they say. So starting your journey, it is about the self-awareness that you have. It's about situational awareness. Those first two bullets are the major components of what we call emotional intelligence. You got to be able to read the room. You got to know where you're at and figure out what's the best thing to do for safety, for security, and to make change. It's helpful to be realistic, to understand what it is you can do, what's available for you, and what may be the limits and your own limitations. And to acknowledge those, like my friend could not do, creates a stumbling block to being truly resilient. You want to learn from your experiences. You want to take the opportunities that are placed before you and make the best of it. And so as I move towards the closing remarks, You know, I am reminded that another part of the foundation for resilience is simply serenity. It is about accepting what you can't change. Most of us know the rest of this. It's the courage to change what you can. And it is certainly the wisdom to know the difference. For me, with the story that I just shared, I'm trying to find the wisdom so that I can deal with what I can accept and what I won't, not can't, but won't. And whether or not there's even an opportunity to create some change on the part of my friend. I would hope that that will happen, and it remains to be seen. So there are a couple of quotes that I thought might be relevant. Birds will fly over your head. You know that. I can remember when I first moved here to Santa Monica, I was getting ready for a 5K and I was on the pier and a seagull shot on my head. I had to get away from that, but you know, the point is that sometimes that will happen. You don't have to allow them to build a nest in your hair. And the other comes from Audre Lorde, that caring for yourself is not self-indulgence, it's preservation. It's essential. And so I'm gonna leave you again, for some of you, Beyonce may not be on your playlist, but what I would suggest to you, she has a very great song that just came released, and I took some of the lyrics from it because I think it suits the presentation. You want to release your anger and you release your mind. You want to release the stress. You want to release the love, and you want to forget the rest. Now she puts a little bounce on it. There's some bass with it. You can dance to it. But the point here is that those things are also important if we want to make resilience part of our life and part of our playbook. So there are a lot of resources for you. I'm going to skip this because you'll get the PowerPoint. You'll be able to take a look at that at your leisure. I'm really glad I could be here this evening. And I think I have time. I didn't do too bad for some Q&A.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Gunn. Very, very, very helpful information. Thank you so much. We will definitely be looking at that PowerPoint over again and try to see if we can become more resilient. It's good for all of us. And as you said in the beginning, if we're not resilient and come to the table with resilience, then we're not going to do as much good. So we want to do as much good as we possibly can and positive change in the world. So thank you so much. I do have a question to start with, and this is from Angela. She wants to know, Dr. Gunn, if you could speak about the power of creating vision boards, purpose-driven life, and how vision boards could be launch pads for change. And what you think about that?
Well, yeah, you know, and vision boards they all are about almost kind of throwing the spaghetti on the wall and trying to see what fits and what doesn't, and creating some semblance of structure, depending on what the interest or the goal is. And so in different, you know, community organizations, of course, which some of the folks on the screen have been a part of, Ms. Kirkland talked about that when we were back in the day working with the Black Agenda. So it helps you to get an idea. It helps you to look at all the possible things that are out there. And then through a process of considering your interests and your goals, connecting dots, eliminating things that are irrelevant or not helpful for the moment, so you can figure out and plot a destiny, if you will. So I think they're helpful.
Great. Thank you so much. Joanne, do you have a question?
No, I don't see any questions in my chat.
Okay, while people are thinking about questions, if you have them, you could send to Joanne or I. Dolores Sloan from the Landmarks Commission sent me a message, and I think it is very important. And it says, as a result of Liam Davis's motion on 614, which was unanimously adopted by the council, following, some of you remember that there was a landmarks designation of Avian Way because of the racist redlining activism of its builder in the 20s. For the Landmarks Commission to look in how can it provide a foundation in its operation for handling these kinds of issues. So, you know, usually Landmarks Commission looks at whether or not it should be landmarked, but they don't look at why, what the background of a building is. So now they're going to establish a task force subcommittee to meet with CRJ and other similar groups to develop a framework for addressing social justice issues in future landmarking decisions. So people may want to write the commission, this is for tomorrow night's meeting, acknowledging this and giving support and encouragement to working with the subcommittee. So I just want to mention that while we're talking. I would also like to say that if you have a way that you are, that you keep your resilience, that you want to add to or have an example of what Dr. Gunn has said, please put that in the chat as well, because we learn from each other's specific ideas. So I also use music, but you may use something else that the rest of us could benefit from. If you use music, you could put in the title of a song that we might not know. Erica Leslie just put in that she uses, that she prays, and her faith is very important to her in her resilience as well. So there are probably others who, no matter what your faith is, may use your faith tradition as well.
You know, I would just say, just to add, Reverend Jay, that generating a list of what people use to maintain their resilience, keep calm, could actually be a nice little tool for the CRJ toolbox, especially because you are working very hard and oftentimes pushing that boulder uphill for change. And it takes resilience to remain committed to activism. And it takes healthy resilience to be a good compatriot in the efforts for change. Because we also know, and we got to be honest, that there can be some people whose heart is in the right place, but their habits and their approaches stink.
Yeah.
And they can mess up your cha-cha. By that, I mean, you're ready to get some things going and to make some change, and someone kind of, because of the way they deal with life, can kind of throw a monkey wrench, a hand grenade into your process. So it's worth it to hear what people that are involved with CRJ do to keep calm, because you all are stirring up the pot on a lot of levels and dealing with difficult issues, challenging issues. You need people who are resilient and make the contribution in a way that moves you forward, not pushes you backward.
Jan, people are still not putting too much in the chat. Maybe we could go on to Rana's presentation and then give people more input to think about things, and questions will come up.
Right. I want to mention the two that have come in, not questions, but what they are saying, and then we
Okay, go ahead.
can do that. So Rana says, music is healing. Victory Brinker is a 10-year-old Black opera singer. I listen to her sometimes during the day while working. The voice of an angel. Wow. And Susan uses meditation when they recommend meditating 30 minutes a day. That's pretty difficult for most people to commit to. But if you commit to meditating just 5 or 10 minutes whenever you feel stressed, you get in plenty of meditation time. For me, it changes everything to have a portable, free tool that doesn't depend on anyone else. And Jean Gasca does acupressure or self-massage on herself. And we've learned how to do some of that in her Tuesdays at 2. So there are ways that you can work on your own body and balance physically, and that helps. And what I want to just mention is that when you're working on such important issues, sometimes you're worried about stepping back, but sometimes, like Dr. Gunn said, if you don't step back, you might be the person that's causing more harm than good. And we're all, that's why we're a community. Somebody can step back and somebody else could step forward. So you don't have to feel like you have to play the whole tune by yourself. It's like an orchestra. Somebody else going to take the violin's turn and it's the drummer's turn now. So, okay, so I think we will go on to our next speaker, Rana. So it's going to be introduced by Craig Ali.
Thank you. Rana Kirkland is a certified yoga instructor, certified yoga nutrition and meditation instructor. I need to get that straight. She currently works for the nonprofit One for Health as their National Director of Advancement, providing free wellness programs to low-income youth across the country. With this background, she is an actress, and Rana has developed their online instructions for kids in a fun and engaging way. She practices mindfulness and fitness in her daily lifestyle. Rana Kirkland.
Thank you, Craig, Ollie. And thank you to Angela and everyone for welcoming me. And yeah, Dr. Gunn, I've always had tremendous respect for your work. And now I also have a lot of respect for your singing. Thank you for sharing. So my disclaimer is to start, I got to say, I'm not a doctor, you know, and people have different sensitivities that natural wellness may or may not be the right thing for. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. These are just some of the things that work for me. Supercharging resilience is such a meaningful topic to explore in these trying times of pressure, you know, financial, racial, physical, and so many other pressures that we're all doing our best to cope with every day. And it's true that, like most matters in society, our Black and Brown communities are the most stricken by these pressures. And so mindfulness is a healthy and affordable, mostly free way to manage many of these pressures. Thich Nhat Hanh said, to live in the actual moment is life. And from that, we can truly experience through mindfulness what the present moment is and truly experience the fullness of life when we're being present. And there are many ways that I integrate mindfulness into my daily life, and happy to share those with you. Let's see if I can get this PowerPoint going. I can only see Craig on my screen, so hopefully you guys will be able to see this. Let me know. Let's see here.
I think for people who only see one person on their screen right now, if you want to put your view to gallery view.
I see. Okay. Okay, so can you guys see this screen? Okay, great. So, for mindfulness, natural ways to maintain peace of mind. And I love just the concept of natural ways because in addition to being African-American, on my dad's side of the family, they're strongly Cherokee Indian, and everything is about being natural in that culture. I remember my grandmother, my great-grandmother was born on an Indian reservation, but my grandmother often talked about not using a lot of what she would say, white man products, for example, you know, and so instead of using, you know, certain like fragrance kind of deodorants, things like that, they would use like natural kinds of deodorants. So, I think she would be very proud. She's passed away now, but I think she'd be proud to know that I'm doing work in a very natural way. So let's see, moving along here. just going to talk a little bit about what meditation is. We're going to talk about yoga, mind, body, spirit, nutrition, how to make some healthy choices, and also how to integrate mindfulness into our daily lives. So let's see, I want to move this over. Okay. So there's been a lot of scientific research done on mindful meditation, and this is based on some research of meditators and what the responses were. So the first class here we're looking at is the impact on the brain structure, and the gray matter gets increased when we meditate, and gray matter affects our learning, our memory, our emotional regulation, our processing. And according to the Mayo Clinic, the definition of mindfulness is the focus on being intensely aware of what you are sensing and feeling in the moment without interpretation or judgment. And according to UCLA research by Diane Winston, Director of Mindfulness Education, that study showed that she did that 49.6% of the time, we're not in the present moment. I hope that all of you are right now with me. So moving on to emotions and the impact of emotions, it increases positivity when we meditate. It has also been known to decrease anxiety and depression. You know, as I mentioned earlier, everyone's coming to the table from different places. So obviously more serious matters should be dealt with in medical processes, but this is definitely a natural way to approach that can be helpful. And that was a study done by the American Psychological Association in 2019. The first one was done by a Harvard research study, which I believe was in 2018. And then the impact on the body, meditation has been known to moderately be effective in relieving pain. And that research was done at the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And it showed how meditation basically decreases the cortisol in the body, which is the body's response to stress. And it allowed the body to thus be able to heal itself better and quicker. This last quote I just put in there because I think it's just so present, right? For the present moment, humankind cannot bear very much reality. And sometimes I feel that way when I turn on the news, and perhaps you do too. So then moving on to mindful yoga practice, and we're talking about conscious breathing here. Benefits include improving cardiovascular function, also improving mental health, and stretching asanas. Asanas, by the way, are just the yogi Sanskrit way of saying poses. So stretching poses, the benefits are relieving stress and increasing flexibility. Strengthening asanas improve balance and bone health. And you know what's nice is that the medical industry is starting to integrate a lot of these natural wellness practices. So a lot of psychologists are recommending meditation. A lot of medical doctors are even recommending things like yoga for improved bone health. And then at the bottom here, I just shared a quote: if every 8-year-old in the world is taught meditation, we will eliminate violence in the world in 1 generation. And that's one of my favorite quotes from the Dalai Lama. But I also prepared a few funny quotes for us too. Funny yoga poses quotes include: the only yoga pose that I have perfected is the yawn. Yoga helps me calm down from the agonizing stress of getting to yoga class on time. Yogi Bear said, I do yoga to burn off the crazies. And then lastly, just a favorite phrase of mine when I talk about yoga, I say, yo gonna love it. So, and just before we move on, breathing, conscious breathing in yoga, we call it pranayamas. That's again, the yogi Sanskrit name for it. Stretching and strengthening asanas are not supposed to be about strain or pain, but there's a lot to gain from it. Okay, so then moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition and mindful eating. I just sort of put a comparative list together of, and this may bring up a few questions for people because not everything's for everybody. I get that. But it is important to eat mindfully. Usually when I eat, I try to make sure most of the time that, that it's quiet, and that I'm eating slowly. Someone mentioned prayer earlier. I always bless my food. You know, those sorts of those are just examples of practices to implement in mindful eating. So some healthy choices include staying hydrated, which helps to put lemon in your water. Lemon in the water also keeps the body alkaline, and it's very hard for disease to exist in an alkaline body. Eating every 3 to 4 hours actually balances our metabolism. Having balanced meals that include protein, carb, and healthy fats, and that doesn't have to be like huge meals. It can be very small meals, like a little peanut butter and jelly sandwich can be a serving, you know, throughout the day, and you're going to get your protein, carb, and healthy fat. Enjoy at least 2 to 3 servings of fruits and vegetables. Snack on high protein nuts and seeds. Use natural sweeteners like honey. And then, of course, unhealthy choices are things like eating late at night, starving the body. Like, a lot of people think that in order to gain weight, they'll say like, okay, I'm just not going to eat all day, but that actually has the counterproductive effect, because you're then causing your metabolism to go to basically slow down, and it makes your body store fat so that your body doesn't feel like it's starving, which makes it actually harder to lose weight. Although I do believe in intermittent fasting, which is like once you've sort of gone through your 8 or 9 hour day or whatever, and you've had these meals every 3 to 4 hours, it is important for the body to not eat anything for at least 12 hours, because that's very important for our digestive system, in order for our bodies to properly assimilate and digest food. Of course, also unhealthy eating choices are having imbalanced meals, eating processed foods, maximizing on meats and dairies, and enjoying lots of sugars from pastas, sweets, and juices. And then at the bottom, I just put in like supplements that are generally very good that I recommend. Vitamin D, it's not only really good for the bones, but it's also considered the sunshine supplement. So, you know, when we talk about resilience, it'll put you in a better mood in dealing with some of the stresses of the day. Omegas are really important for the brain. B complex vitamins for the nervous system, probiotics for the digestive. Natural enzymes like papaya can also be good for digestive. And then I just put like N ... because I could go on and on and on about that. And then lastly, these are just some of the general ways that mindfulness can be integrated into our daily lifestyle, through exercising every day. And exercising every day doesn't have to mean, 45 minutes at the gym. It can be going for a walk for half an hour, it can be doing yoga at home or whatever. Meditation, I think somebody put in the chat, even if you, I think the person said, if you only have 5 minutes, but actually in order to meditate, to fully go into meditation, you have to be doing it for at least 8 minutes. So, if you've got 10 minutes to meditate, that's great. And I actually set timers on my phone, and I don't always get to it, but I do my best. And at least the timers are there a couple of times a day. getting fresh air, being in nature, getting adequate sleep, avoiding negativity. Dr. Gunn talked about that earlier. She also talked about, positive music. I would add to that things like movies and books. Of course, we just went through eating healthy. Definitely helps us to have peace of mind, believe it or not, because food can have a big effect on our moods. Prayer and spiritual practice has been mentioned. Dr. Gunn also mentioned gratitude as an attitude. And I would also add reading, because reading is known to actually lower blood pressure. So those are just some of the daily lifestyle tips that we can integrate so that, once we've turned off the news, we can sort of still be able to maintain a balanced, healthy, and comfortable lifestyle. And I just want to say, lastly, I consider myself an 80-20 girl. And what I mean by that is nothing in life am I 100% about, nor do I expect any of my clients or any of us to be. To err is human. But if 80% of the time you are implementing these kinds of positive mindfulness experiences, practices, you're going to be able to have much more peace of mind and therefore more resilience to dealing with many of the pressures of our lives.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Rana. Very, very helpful. Appreciate it so much. We do have a first question that kind of goes right to what you were talking about, was would watching less TV help, or thinking critically, or how can we think critically while we're watching it?
No, that's a really good question. And I definitely would say that the short answer is yes, watching less TV is helpful, and definitely making smart choices about the TV that you do watch and being mindful enough to recognize how you feel. So you might be watching this really well-written television series, but when it's over, you all of a sudden feel like a lot of anxiety in your body, and if you're being mindful, you're going to be aware of that. And that should be a clue that maybe that's not the best TV show to be watching. So yes, definitely less is more when it comes to television. And then in terms of, the critical thinking, yeah, I think it's like, being mindful in that state of, this really something I should be watching right now. So what I do is I've kind of, as of lately, given myself sort of a timer, particularly with like CNN, and CNN is great. But I know that after I've watched it for a while, I start to feel some anxiety. And so I make sure that I'm only watching it for a limited amount of time. And I don't have like the FOMO, like they say with social media, the fear of missing out. I just say, okay, that was my 10-minute slot and now I got to go.
Thanks. Since we have our other speaker has her hand up. We're not going with hands, but she is our speaker, so we're going to let her.
Yeah. Hi.
Well, I just wanted to respond to this question and the idea about multitasking, which was kind of embedded in what they were asking. Can you critically think and also stream whatever it is that you enjoy watching? And generally speaking, the notion that you can multitask is a false one. It is not, especially if we're thinking about complicated things. And we have convinced ourselves that we can do it well. And there's so many examples of why we can't. And so that's really important to think about. And when it comes to resilience, as well as healthy living, you've got to focus. And you can't focus if you're juggling a bunch of things mentally. Maybe you can talk to your cat and, fry an egg at the same time, but those are relatively simple things. And with my cat, it's actually a complicated task. I can't do them both. So that's something to think about, because it can undermine your ability to really be focused in a resilient and mindful way.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Gunn. And it reminded me of a Thich Nhat Hanh quote where he says, when you're washing the dishes, just wash the dishes.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Right. Okay, I have a few more, but do you have one, Joanne? I have some more.
No, I think everybody's sending all the questions to you, Janet, which is fine since I'm not so good at watching this stuff.
So I have a question. What was the first change you noticed when you started practicing yoga and mindfulness? And how long ago was that actually?
Sure. No, thank you. So I started practicing yoga about 25 years ago. I was a classical ballet dancer at my genesis and learned a variety of different areas of dance. And so when I got older and that became much more challenging, yoga seemed like a great segue to maintain physicality, but also really, take care of my body at the same time. I got certified as a child yoga instructor 21 years ago and certified in nutrition and meditation 10 years ago. And I think that what's changed is, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that I am a more compassionate person, present with being compassionate, I think is really, I think I've always had a compassionate heart, but I think the consciousness of being compassionate definitely is what changed for the better. But I'm still working on it, it's an endless practice for all of us.
Great, thank you so much. And then this is the age-old question. How much water should we drink a day?
That's a really good question. And the answer is that it's different for everyone, right? Because the variables of things like if you're taking a lot of vitamins and medicine, you're going to need more water in order to digest, right? If it is hot outside, you're going to need more water. If you are exercising a lot, you're going to need more water. Actually, if you're feeling stressed, water can be one of the best ways natural ways to eliminate anxiety. So all of those factors are really relative to the person. But I would say if you can drink at least 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, you're, as a minimum, you're probably fine with that. And the reason I talked about, putting the lemon in it is because first of all, you're getting a ton of vitamin C. It also tastes better. And like I mentioned, it alkalines the body so that you would think lemon being acidic would have an opposite effect, but it actually alkalines the body.
Great, thank you. And a lot of us may have this question. Are there tips for getting better sleep at night? Sherry says that as I entered a different phase of life, I have trouble staying asleep and usually wake up in the middle of the night. I think many of us have found that to be true.
Yes, that's almost like an epidemic. It's like, it's so incredibly common how many people are challenged with sleeping through the night. So tips, I would say a few things, definitely unplugging television, music. Dr. Gunn is nodding, she knows, unplugging, everything at least an hour or so before. The only thing that I might have on like in the evening and that hour before I go to bed is maybe like a yoga video that I was watching or some like calming meditation music. But for the most part, it just really helps to calm the mind to unplug before you go to bed. Nutritionally, I'm a big proponent of magnesium. Magnesium is the first mineral that the body loses when it's under stress. And there's a product called manufactured by a company called, I think it's called Calm is the name of it, capital letters CALM. And it's a powder form of magnesium, which you can just put into water and it will, Dr. Gunn, you probably try this. It will absolutely help to calm the nervous system throughout the day and evening if you need. And the other thing is that I think is very helpful actually is to stretch, because for many of us, and the person mentioned, reaching a certain age, with bone degeneration over age, the body starts to constrict. Also with stress, the muscles constrict. and that doesn't allow for healthy sleep. So even something as simple as like laying on your back on your yoga mat, putting your legs up in the air gets the blood circulating through the body. Stretching, like reaching up to the ceiling, and then trying to touch your toes, reaching for your toes, that kind of a thing. It will just loosen up the body to allow it to be able to relax more. And then there's always like a nice jacuzzi tub before bed if you have.
Yes, so Dr. Gunn, one for you. If we are committed to improving our environment, but not the sensitivity from others, are there signs and keys that you should be aware of for the greater good?
I'm not too sure if by environment you mean the physical environment itself or the social environment. So I'm not sure.
Greg, you want to say social or physical?
Come on, tell me what you're talking about.
Social, interacting with other people, and I mean, just the back and forth. And what brought this up is the whole reason why CRJ was formed in the first place. People didn't see that what they were doing were wrong, but yet and still it was. And so in our work, because this is stressful work, in our work, if indeed we hit rock bottom, what is it then that we can look at, as an inspiration to get across the fact that that is indeed a toxic thing, and we need to more or less address that toxicity?
Well, you know what? Sometimes one of the best tools for toxicity is actually maintaining some hopefulness. And that's, what I understand is that, again, when you're trying to push the boulder up the hill, and in fact, sometimes if you get it to the top, there's somebody standing there to kick it back. That's that rock bottom. It rolled up and the rock came down, is to perhaps even remind yourself of what other folks have accomplished under similar circumstances. It's also to check yourself, as I began this with, to figure out what may have wrecked your effort, to recalibrate, to evaluate. I say this to community organizations all the time, particularly of the type that CRJ is, because it's a safe bet, and this is realistic expectations. For every accomplishment you make, given what you're interested in, there are going to be moments that are setbacks. And so being prepared for that potentiality actually gives you the resilience to overcome it, because you got some game plan. You got more than just plan A. You got plan B, you got plan C. You look at what you have done. You ask yourself some hard questions when things work, as well as when they fail, about how it worked, or why it didn't. And those are hard and difficult conversations to have, but they are essential for, in this case, CRJ, to be a resilient organization. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much.
Spot on.
Ooh, I satisfied Mr. Ali.
That was great. That was great, Dr. Gunn. Janet, do you have any more questions?
Can I make a comment?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that, like, some years ago, I lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and every afternoon people would sit on their steps, outside on their steps, and tell stories and make jokes and talk about experiences for the day and so on. And I found that very helpful. And there's a similar program on PBS World Channel called Stories from the Stage. And in that program, people come on stage and tell their stories, tell how they overcame an accident, talk about experiences at the bank, And a lot of time, these storytellings bring a lot of humor and laughter with it. So I think storytelling is a way to experience resilience and how people became resilient as they told of their experience. So I just thought that maybe storytelling was a good thing to look at as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. I just want to say something I forgot to say earlier, and that is that if you are not on the listserv of CRJ, if you're here for the first time and you want to know what the upcoming workshops are, because we have workshops every month, put your name in and email address in the chat, and we will add you to the list so that you can be informed.
Great. And so if you registered we have your email, we're going to send a follow-up email. I have 2-3 things that will be on that email. Lawrence Bender has told us that there's a brand new cause-based Rotary mental health awareness club. The mental health is a very important part of health, of course, and it's open to all. So I will put that information in to the email that's going out, as well as I did put in the chat, but I'll also put in the email Dolores Sloan's information in case you would like more information about Landmarks Commission meeting tomorrow night. That's forming that subcommittee that's going to look at should we landmark or how do we figure out if we should landmark buildings that have a racist history, and should we keep those buildings going, or should we, so there's a subcommittee going to be looking at that. I'm not sure what this one means. How do you teach high school students? Working 3 scholarship for 33 years now. That's from Lawrence. Did you want to say something quickly, Lawrence?
Just how do you reach high school kids with this wonderful information we got tonight? They need it. There's anxiety, depression, all kinds of things going on.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, the organization I work with, I'll put it in the chat before I run One for Health. We do offer free programs for youth across the country with opportunities like yoga and One for Health Foundation and nutrition, cooking, these kinds of things. And it's been very positively impacting. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
And is, of course, the slides from Dr. Gunn, and then Lloyd Wilkie also shared with me a link for, he's a part of, I don't know if you're the leader of the band but your band, I guess, has a new song. Would you like to speak about that, Lloyd?
Really happy to talk about it. The name of the song is Love Revolution, and I just thought it was apropos, and I just thought I'd share it with y'all. And if you're interested, you can click on the link and hear the music.
Great.
Our band is called The Gift. We're going to be at the Mint on August the 3rd, which is a Wednesday night at 7:45. Love to see you out there. Hi, everybody. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. So yeah, so we'll put that link in there and you can click on and maybe you can go see that band as well. I believe that our next workshop is going to be Shelley Tuckluck. Joanne, you want to say what that is?
Yes, now that we really have gotten a wonderful discussion and thinking and tools and so forth about building our resilience, we'll be ready for our August 7th workshop, which is a little heavier than this. And that is, Shelley Tuckluck is a professor and a person who knows a lot and has been studying for years about the development of this white supremacy, white nationalist movement that we see happening in our country. So she's entitled her presentation, confronting conspiracy theories and organized bigotry at home and in our communities. And it's an update on the talk she gave us a few years back, right after we were hit by the Proud Boys and folks like that.
Yeah, she's very, very good. I hope you all can tune back in. And but practice your resilience in between because you'll need it. All right. Okay, so now is the time when we get to unmute ourselves and repeat after me. So unmute. We have a chant to end the workshop. You can repeat. It will be chaotic just for your information because this is Zoom. So repeat after me. I'm not free.
I'm not
Free.
If you're not
You're not free. That's free.
You're not free.
you're not
Free.
So I'm free.
So I'm free.
So I'm not stopping.
so I'm not
Not stopping.
So we're all free.
all
All free.
Go in peace, y'all. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
See you. Night.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Carry on.